Hey fam, welcome to Punts for Progress. I'm Reverend Aaron. This is the second installment of New Leftist Questions with the Phoph. We are listening to Generation X with Give Me Some Truth. And like I said, it's New Leftist Questions with the Phoph, whom I have patiently waiting over here. Say hey to the people, fam.
Hi, people.
Okay. So what we do on New Leftist Questions with the Phoph is sort of what the title implies. The Phoph is my cousin and is essentially a fairly new leftist who is doing reading and actually embraced it in earnest and is learning what he needs to learn about it. And we have discussions about his process, and I do my best to answer some of his questions, and we're going to run down essentially two main questions you have, and we're going to talk about some new reading you have on deck and stuff, right? But anyway,
Yeah.
welcome, cuz.
Thanks, cuz. I love being here, man. I'm ready to do it.
Well, the song's just about over.
Okay. Just hear it.
Yeah. Anyway, you can't go wrong with Generation X, man. Give me some truth. And that's what we're going to try to do today, right?
Yeah,
Dad
absolutely.
jokes. Okay. So the first thing that you had on your mind, you mentioned, was something to do with I mean, I'll let you ask it, but it's in relation, I guess, basically to what would an organizational structure look like post-capitalism? Is that right? I'll let you, but...
Yeah, well, so, when we talked about Malatesta last week, a lot of what I was reading from him was the ideas of abolition of the state or abolition of the government. And initially, I thought that he was talking about the idea of just, nope, no government, that's it, nothing. We can handle it ourselves. There's no need for a government once there's no capitalism, and we can actually learn how to work together. But that was something that in my head, reading later on in what you gave me, I noticed that there was the idea of, okay, well, now that capitalism's gone, it would be very difficult to manage some of these normal day-to-day things that need to happen, road structures and basically, just preserving things for the betterment of society, different institutions that would help, to preserve nature conservation and things like that. And without something structured, it would be difficult to manage that because it would come from that, kind of come from that. I don't like using the word centralized, but there would be some kind of structure that says, okay, well, hey, look, we need to work on this, we need to work on that. And so I guess my first question is, do I change how much sugar I add and how often when I'm whipping egg whites based on the soft peak, medium peak, or stiff peak?
Okay. Well, that will be entirely up to you. And I will just say that in a post-capitalist society, I hope that we retain the recipe for Cheez-Its, including the cancer-causing preservatives and whatever toxic shit that goes into them. They're one of the only perfect things that ever came out of capitalism are Cheez-Its.
Cheez-Its.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I could argue that.
Yeah. If if you ain't down with Cheez-Its, do you even really revolution? Yes. The
Right.
answer to that is yes. You can seriously revolution absent Cheez-Its.
Okay. Because there's some dude right now going, I don't even like Jesus. Can I not be a part of things? You can totally be a part of things. Go for it.
No, well, I think
No,
what well, I was
go
going to say
ahead.
what I think it sounds like you're getting at, Cuz, is the idea that like it speaks to something we touched on briefly in the last episode of New Leftist Questions with the Phoph, where we talked about the difference between being an authority and being authoritarian, right? So
Right.
we still want leading figures that know, like air traffic controllers, right? Like we don't, we're not going to socialize that job. We need authorities on using the software and the training, have the training in order to direct air traffic, right?
Right.
When you have when you're building a new building or doing some major, works project, building a bridge, you need a foreman on that project. You need a lead person that is the expert on, architect, all this kind of stuff. And we
And
want to
engineers. Yeah.
engineers, exactly, and we want to retain that and recognize that kind of stuff. There's nothing wrong. Like we touched on this last week too. The basic notions of what is a society, what is civilization, if not people working together to maximize efforts in order to minimize struggle, right?
Mhm.
And so we would, of course, whatever mechanisms we have in place that are specifically there to just maximize profit, we'll probably just get rid of. But like whatever infrastructure we have in place in terms of how to build a highway system or how to do sewage or to how to properly roll out the internet, we're still going to rely on the experts in those fields and the mechanics and the engineers and all that kind of stuff, right? But what will be so different will be the way with which each person who comprises those positions, each individual worker, is being treated fairly and compensated properly. Well, compensated is probably not even the right word. Like we're all basically taken care of. Okay, we have all the things we need. There's enough resources on this planet, and we have the technology to properly facilitate distributing it to everyone on the planet. The only thing that causes all this disparity and poverty and hunger is the profit margin, is the mechanism that's in place to keep the resource from the consumer absent some type of profit component, right? So
Right.
we wouldn't be organizing our governments per se. Maybe even government probably isn't the right word, but it wouldn't be organized in any way that we recognize now, really. Because, I mean, for starters, the US Constitution, for example, was first and foremost drafted to protect the very specific interest of rich, white landowning, hetero, cis males. Okay? Um,
Yeah.
and then everything follows from that. Okay? Where, no, right out the bat, our societal constitution would be built around equal and fair treatment of all people, right? And a fair, equal distribution of services and resources and so on. So, you look at the basic structure of early Russia with the Soviets. You get a glimpse they made all kinds of mistakes, and I don't want to tout the early or any phase of the Soviets as being sort of the model upon which we should gauge things. But the fundamental thing was there in which a Soviet is basically a group of people who get together for a specific interest, right? And so it was a union
Okay.
of Soviet socialists. Okay, so it was all these different Soviets, whether it's loosely described, bear with me here, a Soviet of, electricians, or a Soviet of painters. Okay, so it's a union of these different Soviet groups. This is anarcho-syndicalism in a sense too. This
Right.
is the way the IWW is structured, fam.
Right.
So you have delegates representing each Soviet's interest. We wouldn't call it a Soviet, but each individual group's interests. And it's not a representative that we go, okay, we're going to pick you because we think you can do the best job of representing us. It's no, we're picking you to go there and tell them specifically what we said. And them is yet another organizational structure of like the delegates of each of the subgroups, right? To where then you would eventually have some kind of I hate the terminology because it's been so fear-mongered and demonized over the years, but it's a sort of central committee organizing. Okay. But
Is that okay? Can I ask you something real quick?
Go ahead. I know that was
Is
a
that similar to?
lot of information, and I hope some of that felt like I was answering your question. Is this making sense to you, Cuz?
I was thinking of this Rocky and Bullwinkle episode, and just kind of phased through most of it. But what I wanted to know was, so I'm part of a union at my work, and it's an amalgamated union. I'm where I work. We are in a local chapter of the larger union, and they get together from time to time to do and to do larger groups together with representatives who go and speak on behalf of the local unions. Is that similar to what you're talking about?
Yeah, no, very much so. It becomes more complex, but yes, now you're getting a glimpse into what it may look like. And I think also I should say, Cuz, that we really don't know exactly what it would look like, because it has to reflect the contemporary conditions. The world is ever evolving and changing. And the structure of these
Right.
different organizations would change in flux with that, right? So, but yes, it's very, look, the union is at its heart one of the greatest manifestations of leftist organizing we've ever seen. Labor organizing itself to defend its own interests, right?
Right.
Now, labor specific unions can be corrupted. It's possible to have someone come in and maybe the leadership, and because there's money involved with labor dues and all this other stuff. And there's all kinds of weird, shady things that have gone on. But that's because we still have capitalism going on at the same time, constantly attacking those unions. Why? Because it's labor organizing, and one of the things that why I originally got a red card and became a WOB. I'm not in good standing. I haven't paid dues in a long time. Not so unlike any WOBs. But the notion that in 1905, when the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, first began, they were, the labor fight, the labor struggle at the time was, a fair wage for a fair day's work, or right. And IWW came out and said, no. The workers and the bosses have nothing in common, and we have to undo the capitalist ruling class. We're not asking for a raise, man. Okay. Right. But this was a union. It was one big union, right?
Yeah.
So yes, Cuz, if you can think of the mechanism, let me just say this and I'll let you go. If you can think of those mechanisms within your union that are the most pro-worker and pro-labor, that's probably getting up against or starting to resemble the way we would want to structure a post-capitalist society.
Okay. Well, I'm interested in how that really would look, because most of the things that our union is fighting for is wages versus healthcare, wages versus retirement, and without a capitalistic ruling class, it seems like a lot of those would become non-issues. We're looking at a society where we would hope to understand people are just going to have health care. You're not going to have to worry about that anymore. When you retire, you don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to have enough money to survive after having worked for 20, 30, 40 years of your life, laboring. You're going to be okay. So what the unions would represent, I'm a little curious to see what that would be. I've always, and you can correct me totally if I'm wrong on this, but the way I've always seen, not just my union, but any union, was that their role is to make sure that workers are not fairly, but justly compensated for the work they do. And that punishments, for violating some kind of company policy, that the punishments are fair based on the violation committed. You can't just get fired because you got caught picking your nose, stuff like that. That the punishments are always fair. Because I don't personally have a problem with at a workplace them saying, "Hey, we'd like you to conduct yourself in this manner while you're here." And if you know that that's the way that they want you to conduct yourself, and you decide to not act that way, then it would be ridiculous to think that they wouldn't.
Well, and it should be, and because it should be the other members, your direct peers in labor, right? That should be determining whether what you did was detrimental to the project or not. Not someone at the top who doesn't ever talk to you, or even if it's just management,
never done your job.
Who has never done your job, right? And this is again why unions are so constantly under attack from the capitalist ruling class, because it gives us little glimpses into the power of that. That's one of those things that can make us realize, well, shit, if we can get all this together and we can pull that off, what else can we do? Oh, that shit, that realization right there terrifies the bosses.
Right. And you were talking about like the buildings and the bridges and things like that, and how we would still need the engineers and the construction workers, the people who know how to get this project accomplished. Right. And to me, what it seems is that without capitalism getting in the way, without that worry of profit, you are now free to build the best building, the best bridge, not a bridge that was built by the contractor who was the lowest bidder, purchasing the cheapest resources because he was the lowest bidder, and now he needs to make a profit. So now you got the lowest bidder building something with the cheapest materials, as opposed to if capitalism's gone, if money's gone, what's to stop you from just realizing, well, what's the best we can do? Here's the resources, here's the know-how. Let's just build the best thing. And I don't understand how people just can't quite get that concept of freeing themselves from the idea of money, and I guess I'm just wondering, like when we talk about some kind of, I'm going to call it government for right now, like a post-capitalist government. I'm just going to call it that for now because I don't know what else to call it. But I'm guessing it sounds like it would maybe be something similar to like the General Council.
Well, okay, so this is getting into some more in-depth leftist philosophy and theory because it's, well, okay, no, actually, I was going to get into the Vanguard, but the Vanguard actually really is only applicable while capitalism still exists, because it's a defense to get us to the post-capitalist society. So I don't know that you have to have any type of central committee in a post-capitalist society, because each for like in the framing I used earlier, each individual Soviet group is so hyper focused on making sure that bridges work. Okay, the bridges group, or whatever it is that there's nothing there to corrupt that project.
There's nobody that you have to answer to that's going to deny it because of his own personal stakes or own personal goals.
That's right. And no one's trying to climb up the ladder to become the lead foreman, because why would you want to be the lead foreman? The reason you're not the lead foreman is clearly the lead foreman is the one that's qualified for this. And that's just great.
Right.
And then if the lead foreman proves inefficient, trust me, the other workers, the other members of that Soviet group, right, are going to point out, Sally Frank they are not the best. We
Right.
have repeatedly brought to their attention that we think that this is not the best maximization of our efforts, and for whatever reason, they're not seeming to hear it. And they would just be removed. But they wouldn't have their health care taken away, their livelihood, their home would be the same. And there would probably, the reason that person became a foreman on the bridge project is because they fucking love bridges, dude. They're just like into bridges. So they're still going to be used in some way, unless maybe they've just, I don't know, been at it for a very, very long time. They're not firing as quick as they used to, and we're gonna respectfully make sure that that's treated with the respect it deserves, the honor and respect that it deserves. And again, so it's not like, man, if I could trick the other workers into thinking that I was the one that came up with the idea, I could become foreman, and then I would get an extra $15,000 every year, and I could then finally get the ring for my girl that I've been saving up for, or whatever, right? Like, I'm not trying to necessarily
better benefits.
Right. And so I'm not trying to necessarily demonize that ladder climbing worker under capitalism, you see? Because what other way are they going to survive? But really, you're put in a position to almost have to fuck over your superiors if you are to climb.
Right.
And that's to sustain a certain type of lifestyle that in a post-capitalist society, we all have access to.
Okay. And, I do understand a lot of this is all conjecture. We don't know exactly how things are going to go until we get there. I remember when I first started working where I work, I was in training with a very intelligent guy, and we have a chief of operations who kind of oversees everything, having to do with my job. And we ran into and my very intelligent coworker who was in training with me came up to that chief of operations and just started giving him idea after idea after idea of how he can make things better and how things could improve. And I knew that my buddy, he wanted to move up in the company. He didn't just want to stay doing what we were training to do. But I took him aside and I tried to explain to him, because I'd been at the company for a long time. So listen, if you want to move up, you realize you can't go to him with all these ideas, because he's going to get stressed out that you're gunning for his job. And what my company wants to hear is, this is just a well-oiled machine, and I'm only here to help keep this well-oiled machine running smoothly. They don't want you to have ideas, because in a capitalist society, you're a threat to somebody else's position. And, and so without the capitalism involved, they'd probably be much more prone to look at my buddy and say, oh my gosh, this guy's got some great ideas. We need to put him somewhere where he can implement those ideas.
And he's not out here trying to impress some boss somewhere. The only people you need to impress are those other people on the job. And the only way you're going to impress all your fellow workers is by doing a kick-ass job.
Right.
All of this is win, 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 win. This is not building some complex infrastructure upon which to disseminate fucking people's roles in society. If anything, it's pulling out all these goddamn complex, cumbersome capitalist obstacles in the way. in the way
Yeah.
of create and that ultimately create a subpar product in the end, because like you said, cuz before, the wonderful example of they're gonna give it to the lowest bidder. How do they come up with the lowest bid? It's by cutting on supplies and the quality of products and stuff that they use, materials they use for the project. And so it's like,
Getting away with paying your workers the least amount you can possibly.
yeah, hiring day laborers and maybe undocumented labor that you can totally fuck over.
Yeah.
Um, that isn't necessarily, if they're willing to um, accept a subpar wage, maybe they're less trained and knowledgeable in that field. So, they're no less equally capable of learning, I would say, but they just haven't learned it. So they're not, as a quality of an employee, right? And you're not paying them much, so they're probably not giving you their best effort on top of not being the best trained worker on the job site. Well, but what it gets to again is this idea that we have to. What is this complex thing? Society's so complex. How are we going to fix all these things and change all these things in a post-capitalist society? And again, I just want to reiterate that it's not. It's removing all the cumbersome complexities of capitalism and allowing the human spirit to fucking roam free. You got to let me be a peacock or whatever it is.
You gotta let me fly.
I'm a peacock. You got to let me fly, man. And even though peacocks don't fly, that's still a funny movie. But
Yeah.
but again, and I also think that it's, capitalists tell us this lie, cuz that we're selfish and that we only care about our own interests. And if that was the case, if humans were inherently selfish and self-centered, there would never have been a civilization ever created, ever. There would never have been a society. We would never have built ancient temples and pyramids, and we would never have had an industrial era or a space age. We wouldn't have communities and suburbs. We wouldn't have punk rock bands. Because all of these things require working with others and sacrificing of yourself, at least in some small way. I think that the exact opposite is actually true, that we are instinctively and by nature a communal species, that we rely on each other to fulfill life and to participate in life. And there's variations of that. There are very it's on a sort of on a spectrum. There are people who generally just can't stand being around other people and they should be alone all the time. That does exist, and that's a normal part of the human condition. It's just not the prominent one, right? The prominent one is,
Right.
let's work with some people and get some shit done. You know?
Yeah. Well, Malatesta had even touched on the idea that even at the beginning of our species, we learned very quick the advantages of working in solidarity with one another, especially considering that we were a weaker animal, compared to, the beasts out there, and working together in harmony with something to help us to gain advantage, based on our surroundings. And we never lost that. It's always been a thing where typically, as a species, we always have understood that working in solidarity with one another helps to gain advantages for us as a species. And the only thing that interrupts the flow of that is, well, what's the cost to me? That's always the interruption, and without that interruption, it would always be just shoot for the stars. You know, I don't see why people. If there's a guy in a job that is, and I know everybody can probably relate to this. There's somebody in your work that is in some kind of management or supervisory position, and you're really wondering how he got to that position, and what are his qualifications. His qualifications usually are he said the right thing to the right person to get the job, and he didn't get that job
Put his
because
tongue on the right
he really
boot.
wants to create.
Right.
Yeah, he doesn't want to create improvements for the company. He just wants to get the better pay because, understandably, he's just like you and me, where you don't work, you don't eat. You don't work, somebody comes and kicks you out of your home. So I can't knock the guy too much for wanting to get that better pay under current circumstances. But in the world that I'm thinking about post-capitalist, that guy, he's not invested in it. He wouldn't be doing this. He'd be like, you know what? If I don't have to be here, I don't really want to buy. Somebody will be more than happy to be whatever needs to be, even just to ensure quality of work or anything like that, you know. But I've been told before. One of the arguments that I've had with a very good friend of mine is it Bill Gates is of the world, right? And the argument is always, well, Bill Gates, he does things to improve the quality of mankind, And my initial reaction to them, and I don't know if you share the sentiment, is, yeah, but okay, it's great that Bill Gates had an idea, created this company when he made way more money than he ever needs, and only because of that, he has the opportunity to improve the conditions for mankind. Now, how many other people are there in the world that are other Bill Gateses or people who just have this unrealized potential because they never get the chance, the opportunity to show that potential?
Right. No, and listen, no, absolutely. And I just got to tell you, we have this massive imbalance in human culture right now, and this focus on Silicon Valley. Like, that's great that Bill Gates came up with what he did. That doesn't make him qualified to do anything other than create that software and shit. Okay. But because we handed him billions of dollars, now he has the qualifications with which we have to rely on for all kinds of other issues. And now he's made his personal mission, vaccine stuff and medical issues and that kind of stuff. And I don't buy into any of the fear-mongering conspiracy theories about Bill Gates. I think he actually wants to do good shit when it comes to that work. I just don't think that he's in any way whatsoever qualified to be in any authoritative position in terms of that stuff. But because he has the funds, he is. And we need him to do that, because if he didn't, who would? Now, right. I'm not going to sit around and start praising Bill Gates for that, though. I'm not going to deep-throat defend it either. And it's just like, again, he should be honored for his contribution to the world of computers and the internet. Maybe even make a statue of the dude and honor him for it. But should he have a position of power in any other way? No. And, we should be listening to him on that issue, unless he's no longer connected to the world of the net and improving and evolving that, computer tech, then he's no longer an authority on it and whatever. But like, before and after his breakthrough, he would have been well taken care of. Yeah. So again, it's just, maybe we could move on to what your second question was, but I will sort of maybe wrap this up again by a third time, sort of reiterating that the post-capitalist societal structure, while it may be a little scary and daunting in our perception, from our immediate perception, But again, we have to it's the hard part is removing all the complex fucking mechanisms that separate us from realizing our true potential, and in order to facilitate the lifestyle of a handful of maybe 2-3 million people out of 7.5 billion, right? And here's the thing, though, and then I think this is crucial to any socialist project. The inevitable question is, well, how do we get there? Well, in whatever aspect of your daily life you're able to start utilizing that sort of post-capitalist socialist organizing principle, right? Like, where we can, let's start creating those socialist alternatives to capitalism, because then we already have the sort of early vestiges of the mechanisms with which to replace capitalism. We already have things working, so we don't have to then rethink everything in some major way. We just start leaning on all these already pre-existing fucking models, right? That's why I regularly, one of the very few things I sort of suggest or demand of people, as it were, is you should be joining an anti-capitalist organization of some kind, in whichever way that is available to you. Everyone's situation is different, but in what way is available to you, you should be organizing with other anti-capitalists. It can be joining a communist party, it can be joining an anarchist collective, a Food Not Bombs collective, hanging out with the P4P crew and doing, watching the activities of fascists and comparing notes like we do. And but still, that's how we get there. Not only is it how we get there, it's how we can envision what we're getting to. Does that make sense? Because we're already seeing glimpses of it in our daily behaviors. Unless you had any more.
Well, because the answer can't always be, so what happens after capitalism? We can't always just go, well, I don't know. Right. Let's figure it out. There has to be some ideas, right?
Right. And we don't want to wait till after capitalism to start trying things, because these put at the core, the foundation of all these different notions that we're talking about is the notion of working in tandem with other people for a goal that's beneficial to a lot of people. These are very solid, righteous goals and organizing principles,
Yeah. And it's not up to me to decide those things. And I wouldn't ever want, don't think I have delusions of grandeur, should our hopes and dreams and what we see as the truth come to fruition, I don't want somebody coming to me or anybody and saying, please just give me the answers. It's like, no. That's not the point. The point is we come up with the answers collectively as a group. There is no more one person telling you, no, this is how it's going to be and that's it. Right?
Right. Unless, it's a situation where that one person just happens to know 500 million times more about it than you do. And then what? You want to listen to them, right? Because they're going to enrich your knowledge.
Right. I know you weren't referring to yourself at all.
Well, you had another question that's very similar to this.
Yeah, and the whole Bill Gates thing was kind of a nice little segue into that idea of why people, I see more and more this odd mentality, this, if you don't smoke Terror Tunes, fuck you. And I don't go out and I don't just start going, hey man, what's up? You busy? Let me talk to you about the evils of capitalism. But when I have conversations with friends, people that I know that I can have a conversation with, I end up talking about my issues with capitalism, which is everything about it. And there's just a lot of frustration because you have talked to me about the idea of not so much pointing out what is the future going to look like, but what is capitalism doing now, and what harm it's doing on the people. But when you try to talk to the people about a life without capitalism, it's like it's like trying to fully encompass the ideas of time and space and folding space and everything, where it's like, there's no way you can shrink that idea into your one head. It's too big. There's no way. Life without capitalism, because the questions are always, well, who would pay for it? The stuff. Somebody's got to pay
Right.
for it. And well, who would pay you then? And what about this guy? He does harder work. What about the doctor? You're saying he gets paid more than, or he gets paid the same as this person? Or you mean I have to work and the guy next door doesn't do anything and he gets the same things as me? And I have learned how to combat some of those where I do tell people straight up, don't worry about the dude next door. You're contributing, you're doing what you can. Now, if you're in a job to where capitalism is gone, there's no more threat of whether or not you need to work, because you're still going to be able to eat, you're still going to have shelter. And now you have the freedom to do whatever you want. You might be in your job and say, you know what, bye, I'm out of here, I'm done. I don't want to do this. There's somebody who will want to do that job. There's somebody who will want to fill that place. And I'd rather have that person there anyway, because they're going to have a true relationship with their work, like Marx was talking about, and their day will be more enriched and more rewarding to them. And all of those people who are like, you mean I'm not getting paid when I was getting paid anymore to do this job? Screw it, I don't want to do it. Well, if that was your only motivation for doing that job, I don't want you there anyway. But people just can't get it. They just
and what's really frustrating? What's really frustrating, cuz, is invariably you'll sort of get done explaining that to a person, and then there's always that person that's going to go, okay, well, if you determine they hate the job and they're not doing good work, so you want the expert there, and then so they just leave the job. Well, how are they going to pay their bills now? And you're just going, dude, I just told you that there's no capitalism, right? Like, this used to drive me mad when I first really, in quite a while now, when I always hated money. Like, as a punk rocker, I was like, money fucking sucks and the search for it is gross and I hate it. But it took me probably into my 30s really to understand really what capitalism was and how it worked. And I would start to explain things to people, and it would always come back with questions like that. Like, well, how would they become an expert if they don't think that they could be rich? Right? Like,
right. Now, real quick, I got a guy at my work. He's a maintenance worker. Now, he spends a whole day, he's cleaning the floors, cleaning the toilets, and things like that. That dude literally has come and said, man, I love this. This is all I have to do all day. And then I go home. That dude isn't looking to go and become an expert in physiology. He's probably more than happy to just come and do his thing. And there's plenty of people like that. And I think people just can't understand the freedom, the idea of the freedom to explore your own pursuits and your own passions. Right. And your enjoyment, your fulfillment may be simply, and I know this is hard for people to understand, but I went over it and I cleaned the place up and kept it clean and sanitary, so that the other people working there have a sanitary condition to work in. And people are actually, that's more than enough for some people. Right. But people don't get that. They think, nope, nobody's ever going to want to clean toilets ever again.
Well, and that's the thing, is that we have been trained to believe that money is what motivates us, that profit is what motivates us, and absent profit, we wouldn't be motivated to do anything. And that's just bullshit because, again, then there wouldn't be civilizations and societies because no civilization, Egypt didn't form because, hey, let's figure out how to maximize profits for our shareholders. Okay. It was
Right.
it's hard harvesting crops and dealing with the yearly flooding of the Nile. And it's, we need to work together to create, I don't know, sewage systems or whatever it is. Right. But we have so internalized so much baggage that it's really, really hard for a lot of people to envision a post-capitalist society. And again, this is yet another example because of why it's so important to focus on not trying to convince people of what life will look like afterward. It's getting them to realize right now what's hindering them. Because what's hindering us from realizing our full potential is the exact same thing that's hindering them from even realizing our full potential is realizable. Okay.
Right. Well, so last week I had said about, the argument, and this has to do with that is, well, I never got a job from a poor person. There's that. And that's that thing of people not understanding what capitalism is doing to them. And I thought about, at first my argument was, well, the problem is that there's poor people. But there's something to that also. Is, if somebody says that to me, from now I'm going to go, one, problem is there's poor people. Two, you don't realize you never got a job from a poor person because you're the poor person. You don't even realize it. Somebody else is exploiting your labor to make profit for themselves, and you're getting paid just enough to survive. And you are a slave to that wage. You don't earn that wage, you don't earn that wage, you live on the street. You can't provide for your family.
And you determine your worth based on all of that. And we're taught that other endeavors, like maybe the stuff that I'm more obsessed with, which are artistic endeavors, are whimsical and unimportant, right? Because they don't create the necessary revenue that gives them the label of being important and substantial and success. To me, I feel the greatest level of success when I actually complete like a painting. I'm not a great painting, but my paintings take a long time for me to go from concept and sketching to a completed thing that I want to show people. And I feel a sense of accomplishment and I feel good. Doesn't matter if anybody fucking likes my painting or not. It really doesn't matter. And generally, the people who do like it and genuinely appreciate it, they like it because they can see the joy that went into creating it. I think, and does that make it, in our current society, that's not justification to have food on your table, a roof over your head, and clean clothes on your back.
Well, people talk about the idea of, like you said, that not everything in life is only motivated by profit. And if that were true, if everything was only motivated by profit, there wouldn't be such a thing as hobbies. That thing that when you don't have to go and slave away at your job, and you get to come home and do what you want to do, it's that thing that you enjoy doing, that thing that's rewarding to you. Whether I like to work on cars. I love to play my game. I like painting miniatures. I know that's not really much of a profession, but I have a lot of different interests that have nothing to do with that job that I have to do because I want to feed my kids. And it is tough trying to make that difference of trying to explain to people what life is like without capitalism compared to, look at what it's doing to you now. Because my mind always ends up wanting to go there. It always wants to go to that utopian society. That that life where you have the freedom to pursue your passions. And I think what I need is I need to start having more of the tools for explaining, breaking down what capitalism is doing, you know, to us as individuals on a day-to-day basis.
Well, on that note, there is an excellent book that every anarchist should own. It's colloquially known as the Bread Book. And the first chapter of
That's a
that
big word.
book does a fantastic job of illustrating the importance of what Phoph just described. And
Is it that book?
like a good new leftist, there it is. The Phoph has picked himself up a copy of Peter Kropotkin's The Conquest of Bread. It's not the do-all, end-all of anarchism, but it's generally the first book a lot of anarchists read. You haven't read it yet. You just ordered it.
Yeah, I just got it.
But you also... But well, I'll just say this to sort of for the to follow through with the thought. That first chapter really breaks down how each and every sort of advancement in technology and human society has been a collective effort built on the collective efforts to precede it, right? So, like, essentially everything is the manifestation of the efforts of the entire human species, but we're letting a handful of people sort of reap all the rewards and benefits of it. But I think that Kropotkin does a really, really excellent job of breaking down that history in a very not only succinct but relatable way. It's sort of another. It's very much akin to a lot of what you see in the Communist Manifesto. It's a dialectical material critique of capitalism and its history in that first chapter, and it gets into a lot of other stuff of what Kropotkin thinks anarchism should be and stuff. And we can discuss that as you go through it, and start reading it more.
Yeah.
And I look forward to that. And
you know what? I'm really looking forward to reading this book. Now, my daughter's boyfriend, who I'm pretty convinced I'm probably going to end up at some point, he's going to become a leftist. He was asking. I was really actually excited when this came in. Like, you would have thought I'd just gotten a new tool for the garage, and he was asking what it was about. Like what kind of book was it? And I told him, I was like, "Are you asking me if it's Animal Farm style, or is it just strictly nonfiction critique, of society?" Or I'm not sure. And I was a little bit curious, and I wanted to ask you: Is it just
yeah, it's just a narrative. It's just it's a nonfiction narrative. It's a work of anarchist philosophy. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's but in a lot of ways he's writing it for the workers and for the people, right? So it's not academically dense, okay? And he's not spending a shit ton of time referencing a lot of different philosophical traditions and stuff. He's really just kind of laying it out. But no, it's not a fact-based fictional tale like Animal Farm and yeah. I mean, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Well, no, it does, yeah. But I have noticed, when it comes to what you were saying about these people writing for the people, I've noticed that these people, Marx and Kropotkin and Bakunin and Malatesta, spend a lot of time writing for the people, and then the capitalists write simply just to protect their capital. They're writing just for the capitalists. All they're doing is writing so that they can stroke capitalists' egos and reaffirm to them, it's good that I'm where I'm at.
Yeah, I often say that fascism is the strong-arm defense mechanism of the capitalist imperialist status quo in crisis. Okay? But with that thinking, I think it's fair to conclude that a form of fascism, ultimately any type of full-on, any form of real defense of the capitalist imperialist status quo is, to one extent or another, a form of fascism. And so I believe it's arguably fascist to spend your life writing, to write a book like The Case Against Socialism by Rand Paul. Now, in that book, he's not saying, hey, man, what we need is a demagoguing strongman to rule us and subjugate us all, and we just have to be subservient to that one person. He's not saying that. But the thesis of a book like that does, in the end, defend a capitalist imperialist status quo. So I label it as fascist. And so, yes, the conquest of bread is anything but that. It is truly a anarchist, socialist, revolutionary piece of literature, and it's crucially important. And I think as you down the road, as you learn more, I think that you will ultimately come to find that there'll be some things that you'll disregard and sort of abandon from the conquest of bread. But much of it you will retain and will stay with you because it just rings so true. But I think that's true of every singular anarchist or communist, revolutionary, socialist voice. You should ultimately find things that shouldn't necessarily be looking for them, but if you're reading them honestly and really contemplating what you're reading and internalizing from them, you should ultimately come to points where you're like, yeah, I've heard you on this one back 4, 3, 6 times now, Malatesta, and I'm just not with you on it, right? You should ultimately have that sort of relationship to any anarchist or communist philosopher, and also keep in mind that they're the era in which they're writing. They're not writing necessarily about contemporary issues and stuff, but you do have.
Well, if I may, there are things that I have come across. Dude, I'm not a 17-year-old just impressionable, young person. There are definitely things that when I read them, I'm seeing some very strong sentiments, and a couple of them I'm like, I don't know if I'm straight up down for that. And what I figure is, the more I read, the more I'm going to be able to kind of come up with my own ideas about that, even if it's not, because I can't go into these things just saying, man, Malatesta, that's it. Everything he says, man, dude, it's the word. And then I read something from Kropotkin and go, okay, no, Kropotkin, everything he says, that's the word. Sorry if I'm smacking things too loud. But,
no. Was it you?
But yeah, I can't. I'm not the kind of person who's just going to read one thing and go, this guy's amazing, and totally makes sense, and then go read the next guy. Forget what I said before. This guy's amazing.
Right.
Now, so far, they've all been pretty amazing.
Well, and as you read them, and especially I think, it's what I found over and over and over again is that this may sound a little arrogant, but more often than not, they're just reiterating, and oftentimes in better and clearer language, notions and conclusions I had already reached and didn't necessarily know how to articulate them. Okay, we're not reinventing the wheel. Okay, capitalism is what capitalism does, yo. And what these people were saying back then applies because they're talking about the same fucking capitalism. And you have another book on order, which I am really excited to have discussions with you on once you get it, which is actually I'll show you. I have a copy of it. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know it was that big.
It's the Malatesta, Enrico Malatesta Reader, The Method of Freedom. And so, like I said, they're just short, to the point, written for the people, man. Malatesta. He's just, I know I keep saying it, but I'm really excited that you have that on order, and we're going to be able to discuss bits and pieces of it as you go through it. And to be able to share that with our followers is going to be a lot of fun, I think.
No, and you know what? I think it's going to go. You know, it's funny because when I read these books, there is a feeling of, okay, I get it, capitalism's bad, and you're telling me capitalism's bad, but it's a lot deeper than that. That's only kind of a feeling in the little back of my head. Is it kind of a preaching to the choir kind of feeling, you know? That I read these and I feel like, man, I wish so many more people knew how to pick up a book, but you go and suggest to them a book. There was one guy that was talking to me about capitalism, talking to me about communism and Marxism and socialism, and I was told him, like, look, I have a copy of the Communist Manifesto if you want to check it out. And I brought it. He said, yeah, I brought it to him at work. He looked at it. I think he was waiting for like crystals to drop down on the cover so that he could hit buttons and make the crystals disappear. And I was like, no, this is a book. You just read it. And he couldn't do it. Yeah, he was looking at me and he was like, there's a lot of words in there that I'm not getting. And I told him, look, I understand that. The thing is one, you do have a phone where you can look up what does this word mean, but two, you'll notice the same words being used over and over again. When I first started, I had no idea what a proletariat was. I had no idea what the bourgeois class meant, but over reading, even if you're not looking on your phone for the definition, you start understanding the context. And the more I read, the more I might read something from someone else, and now I'm reading a different book, whether it's from the same person or by a different author. Understanding these things in a deeper context is what I'm getting from the reading. I'm not reading this just because I want to go, yeah, capitalism sucks, and somebody else tell me why capitalism sucks. It's like, no, I want to understand not just the idea that capitalism sucks, but what is this doing to me? What is this doing to us? And get that deep understanding, because then when people do come to me with questions or people do want to have these conversations, I'll be better equipped to have those conversations with them.
Sure.
As opposed to just going, God, if my cousin was comfortable with it, I'd give you his phone number.
Well, and I would say
otherwise.
No, go ahead.
Well, there'd be a lot of people calling you, because I have these conversations with people a lot, and I've always not really quite understood the idea of why you could be conceived as an intelligent person with a good head on your shoulders, not just me or you or anybody, but the moment even you have these conversations with people and you talk to them about what our government is doing, what capitalism is doing, and you could ask anybody, do you feel like the government really truly represents you as a person and really actually truly speaks for you and is doing things for the betterment of society? Nobody says yes.
Right.
Nobody believes this government actually cares about them. But then when you suggest the change, it's that Terratoons, fuck you sentiment. But America, and that's reading these books. It helps me try to get the understanding and the patience because it's not just being able to have the conversation with them, but it's also the deeper understanding of why they are feeling that way, and how they've been conditioned to feel that way their entire life.
Word. And what I was going to say to that is, again, it's not just reading Kropotkin or Malatesta or even, Marxists, Leninists, and Mao, and reading these kind of things isn't just so new examples of explaining why capitalism's so bad. It's also expressing how to sort of exist and function under capitalism as a person who recognizes the ills of capitalism. We're still living under it. And in a lot of ways, it can be, for lack of a better term, therapeutic to know that other people, adept, intelligent people, are experiencing those things, and we're able to, articulate their thoughts on it, and it helps us better evolve our anti-capitalist project to build on the ideas that came before us, and to expound on them and put them in a contemporary context. And I will say, and we should probably get to wrapping this up, that, there's a constant thing of, obviously we need more people to become revolutionary socialists so that we can have enough people to finally get that we have to end capitalism, right? So it becomes, what are you going to do to win people over? And I have said many, many times that I'm just not focused on doing that at all. But it doesn't mean that I don't recognize the need to. And that's why I think that these types of conversations are really awesome, because I also can't just sit around and necessarily anticipate all the questions that a new leftist may have. Not that I would have an answer to every one of them if I did, but so it's like, this is one, if it's a chance for me to see if I have answers to certain questions, if I have the ability to answer those questions. So I love sort of taxing my own abilities in that way. But again,
real quick.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I want to say on that note, for anybody watching, this is not scripted in any way, shape, or form. We're talking about these things just from what's coming up off the top of our heads. We're not sitting here practicing a script and then just rereading it so that I can, stroke my cousin's ego and he can stroke mine, and we can, want to show how much better we are than everybody else. This is us having a real, true conversation, just like the ones that we had on the phone, until my cousin realized we should be recording these because they're pretty decent conversations.
Right. And so, yeah, I think this is very useful to be able to just give you room to sort of not just ask questions necessarily, but express your process, and kind of speak out loud some of the conclusions you've reached. And I think it's a very what I see, if we continue this, is ultimately being a thing of where you get to a point where you don't really need to be asking me some of these surface level questions anymore. And I would like to think that at that point you could take over sort of the role I'm taking right now in this show, and then bring someone else in who's kind of new and really kind of excited about new leftism and has all kinds of questions, and then, take it from there and continue on from there. And, who knows, maybe that's some kind of idealistic, grandiose thinking. But I mean, the bottom line is, eventually, you and me holding down a weekly show called New Leftist Questions isn't really going to be appropriate. You're going to become a more evolved and more adept leftist who could probably answer a lot of those new leftist questions. And
I'm looking forward to that opportunity to be able to answer those questions to somebody who, like me, was brand new, coming to you and saying, "Hey, man, I got these thoughts on this. I gotta bounce them off you," and having that opportunity to where I feel confident enough to be able to do that with somebody else would actually feel really good. Not just because look how much I know about leftism, but it's because it's helping somebody else to understand why these changes need to happen. And all the reading in the world is great, but you were talking to me about learning more, but you also had mentioned something so important. This is my kind of first step towards joining something leftist, because I don't want to be, and I don't encourage anybody else to just be a scholar that knows everything about leftism and the evils of capitalism. That knowledge doesn't really do anybody any good if you don't do anything with it, and you don't have to jump out right away, but when you feel comfortable and you're ready, this is my step into joining something, in the leftist community. I want to get more involved and more involved, and I do encourage other people to do the same thing.
Absolutely. And remember, to anyone out there watching, I think what you should really gather from this is that it's totally okay to just be where you are with stuff. You have to evolve. Don't stay there. Okay. Continue to, move forward, but be where you are and be real about it and ask honest questions from that perspective. Don't ever put on airs that you know more than you do, because if anything, more often than not, a more learned and experienced leftist is going to spot your bullshit like that. And it's probably just going to be really shitty and dismissive to you. I know I am. I have very little patience or tolerance for fucking blowhard, fake ass fucking leftists. I'll just say whatever it is they need to hear to think I'm the worst piece of shit in the world, and then to leave me alone. Like, really, right. Fuck off. Because all you're going to do is you're not going to pay attention to my responses to you. You're going to be constantly looking for the way to tear it apart, which is not what leftists should be doing. We should be building each other up. And again, I love this opportunity. It's not because, look, it puts me in a position where I'm the learned one, which is, feels kind of good. I'm not going to lie. But I didn't create this information that I filled my head with. I just spent a lot of time studying this information that's available to everyone. I think it's incumbent upon me to share that. But I just have no desire in sit around and try and anticipate what some new leftist may think or want to know, and I'm definitely not going to start scouring Twitter for people, or, I also don't want to be, just for anybody watching that's a follower of P4P, this channel, I will respond to comments and I like criticism, but for the most part, this is not a channel where I'm going to be like making videos because all my followers want me to talk about a thing and stuff. It's a little different than what we're doing over here. So again, that's why this is so useful, because it's organic and it's not forced. Yeah. You are where you are in leftism. 6 months from now, a year from now, we wouldn't be able to do a show like this. It would be a completely different show, because you're actually taking the steps you need to learn more and evolve. And how cool is it that we get to share that with people? So again, I started out this long-winded final comment by saying, just be where you are. Be good with where you are. Be honest with where you are. And just, continue to evolve and continue to grow. But the best way to grow is to be honest about where you're at now.
Can I say one last thing?
Here, let me say this one last thing, and then yes, I will let you. Nobody ever comes or ever becomes fully formed as a leftist. It's always an ongoing process. Go ahead.
Well, I just, from what you're saying, for anybody who is new to leftism, or even if you're not ready to call yourself a leftist, if you are seeing what capitalism does, if you've ever had those feelings of, that capitalism is wrong, you're going to have that, yeah, but I want to end capitalism now kind of feeling. You got to be patient. It's tough and it's frustrating. I told my cousin at the beginning of this that my eyes were open, and I almost wish that they hadn't been, because now it's so frustrating to see the truths of what goes on, today. Not just today, but throughout the history of mankind since capitalism began. And just be patient. Like you said, keep evolving, keep reading, keep learning, and find other people who you can have these conversations, these discussions, and these questions with.
Absolutely. And on that note, I will say much love, thanks, and appreciation to everyone in the P4P family. Much love, thanks, and appreciation to you for watching. And of course, much love, thanks, and appreciation to literally anybody and everybody who does what they can, when they can, get up and out to make life better for other people. It makes a difference. It fucking matters. And I love you, Cuss. What an awesome talk.
I love you too, Cuss.
All right, I'm a peacock. You gotta let me fly, man.
Don't go chasing waterfalls.
What? I don't get it. I don't get the reference.
Designed to kill. 1, 2, 1,